Special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show on the ProNex podcast. And our guest today is Eran Kabakov, and we're going to talk about Docola, but it's really involved in their partnership with ProNex. Eran, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your background and mission, and then we're going to go
Mhm.
and how Docola works with ProNex in their
Sure.
collaboration. Yeah.
Sounds good. My background is healthcare. I've been a healthcare provider for over 30 years, still actually involved in patient care. So I call myself being in the trenches in healthcare. But early on in my career, I started working with technology to help me be more efficient and give the service that I wanted to patients. And really, what happened was that I developed two parallel careers. One is the healthcare providing, and the other one is technology. Docola is really the end result of epiphany that I had in 2001, where I basically saw several patients back to back that were so similar. I came out of the room, the treatment room, with the last person, and I went to my colleague and I said, I just spent 20 minutes with each one of these patients, repeating exactly the same thing, right? Why don't we have a recording of it? We can just let them view it before they see me or after they see me. And that was the day I started looking at technology. So healthcare provider and technology is really my background.
All right, so that's really interesting. And I guess talking about this collaboration of Pronex, how did you find out about them, especially you being in the healthcare industry, and why did you think it's a perfect collaboration?
Sure. I have met, so I've learned about ProNex from Fred Pira, the founder and CEO. He reached out to me many years ago. Yeah, I think it was 2006 or 2007. I get a phone call, and back then I still picked up the phone because there were not as many robocalls that were spamming my phone. So I pick up the phone, and there's a guy on the other line. He told me about ProNex. He told me about the mission, and it really resonated with me on what it is that they're trying to do. Because while the technology that I am developing has to do with the efficient transfer of information to patients, what ProNex does is help the clinicians get the patients through the clinical pipeline. So we really work hand in hand, right? They're helping usher the patient through the clinical steps, and we are supporting the patients with the information that they need. So it made a whole lot of sense of shaking hands and basically saying, let's work together. And initially, we were working as a side by side. We weren't integrated. Later down the road, we integrated, and right now, any clinician that uses ProNex has access to Dacola right inside the platform.
All right, so let's talk about how people who have access to Pronex have access to Docola, and how is it perfect in the process of what Pronex brings to the table?
So let's think about a case study. I think that makes it the easiest
Yes.
way to follow. So let's take in the easiest one is if we are talking about a woman who is pregnant for the first time. So the experience for that woman today is that she would go to the OBGYN office and she would be given some information and be put on a regular schedule of appointments with the healthcare provider. And along that time, along that care continuum, she would have to come in and fill this paperwork, and then she would have to go and get some blood work done. She would have to go and get an ultrasound done. So that they will send her to different places. And what happens today is that it's all verbal and it's all happening anecdotally when it needs to happen. So for the clinicians, they have to keep managing that patient manually, I will call it. And for the patient, there's a lot of times between seeing the clinician that they may have questions, concerns, issues that they don't have the information for. So I call it the vacuum phase. You see your clinician, you get a diagnosis, then they send you home with a treatment, but you're on your own. You're managing yourself. So looking at how Dacola and ProNex work together in the same scenario, the patient would come to the office, be put into the ProNex platform. All the information is going to be collected there. It's going, obviously, that can be pushed into the EMR, right? It's seamless in that regard. But inside ProNex, there is the clinical pathway is already mapped out. So once the patient gets into the first step, ProNex moves them along the way as the clinician decided. Now, where Docola comes into play on that is that, let's say the woman is just left the office after the first visit. When she opens her phone, she has an invite saying, "Let's here's some information about the first trimester. Please review it." And so now she has access to all the information, all the questions she might have, and she can view it, she can review it, she can share it with friends and family. And the clinician receives the confirmation that she actually interacted with the materials. And that helps with charting, it helps with some risk mitigation and quite a few other things. So using ProNex, what you do is you automate your patient pipeline on the clinical pathway, how patients progress along the clinical pathway. And Docola supports them with that, with the information that they need when they need it.
Okay. And that
Yep.
information is educational information, right?
Yes, some of it is educational, but really information, we've moved away from just saying patient education, because I feel patient education is very narrow. Patient education is how to take this pill, how to inject, how to change a dressing. But information really has to do with where to park, what to bring, forms, materials. There are many decision aids to help patients along the way that are not necessarily patient education. They're interactive. One of our content partners is University of Southern California in San Francisco, and they have a program that they developed for advanced directives, right? So a patient most first of all, I should say we should all have advanced directives ready and done, because that's the right planning to do. But it's not so simple. And they've developed a beautiful module that is completely interactive, and that is available as part of the overall program. Information is really much more than just patient education. It's much more than lab results. It's anything that is going to make the experience better for the patient and make the experience better for the healthcare provider as well.
Yeah. Okay, so you're basically making the patient experience. And is that what Docola does? What do you
Yeah.
think the overall mission is of Docola?
Well, yeah. So the mission is to make the healthcare experience better for patients and clinicians. And we're adamant about that aspect of clinicians as well. As a clinician myself, I know that a lot of times we do this, it's a mission, it's a life mission to help people. And so we tend to get burnt out and not have the resources that we need to have long careers. And so we want to make the experience for the clinicians just as good as the patient. But again, going back to your question, our mission is to improve the healthcare experience through better conversations between clinicians and patients.
Is
Simple as
that
that.
and so that is an issue. That's what makes ProNex even better is that integration with Docola and the fact that now patients and clinicians can have better communication than on the phone waiting for different things and more on an online and format that also is protected, HIPAA compliant than a lot of people who are bariatric surgeons or primary care physicians, where they're getting that communication back and forth via phone calls, trying to get on with the doctor versus having this electronic platform to have this communication.
Yes, that is correct. And often when I discuss this subject with people, I always give the example of social media outside of healthcare. If you and I are friends on social media and I want to share information with you, it's so simple. But once you step through the door of the clinic, now I have HIPAA, now I have other regulations, and it becomes very difficult to share information back and forth, right? And I think that the two platforms put together make that whole process so much more intuitive and effective for the everybody who's involved in the care.
No doubt. It brings that effective communication back and forth to make things seamless and in a process, because you're right. When we communicate on social media, if we were a doctor and a patient, it just can't be done. You can't go send a DM in LinkedIn or on Facebook. That's breaking HIPAA compliance, patient and doctor. Now you
Yeah.
have a platform. Before electronic communication, it had to be phone call, then making a phone call back. And email is not very HIPAA compliant either, is it?
No, it isn't, and that's why you see the reliance of some of the electronic communication being done through the patient portals that the electronic medical
Yeah.
records create. But that it makes it very difficult to have to log into a portal to get the messages when you might be seeing multiple doctors, and then you have to start entering these multiple places to get the information. It's very clunky. And I think that another aspect is the fact that the healthcare that we consume is very procedure based. It's almost like an accounting type service, right? We come in and we go through the steps, and it has become like that because of many different reasons. But what it creates is that it creates a process that for somebody who's not a healthcare provider, so the patient, it's a process that is very difficult to negotiate because it's very clinical, it's very specific to that world. And so I think that by better communication around that process, giving the patients and the families the support they need to understand what is going on, provides better value, provides better experience, and overall, we know that technology can improve outcomes when used correctly.
And Docola does a great job, as you said, is let's just say you have an appointment to see the doctor, the communication through now with the integration of ProNex of knowing when your appointment is, what's happening, and what do they need, all these different things. And then if you have questions for the doctor using Docola is integration with ProNex to have communication with the doctor. Am I correct?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So we're closing the loop in healthcare.
Yeah, and then like you said, so let's just say the engagement happens in ProNex. They're interested in bariatric surgery or something. They have a communication. They choose a doctor using ProNex. Have this process back and forth conversation. They schedule the first appointment. That's where Docula sends those things. Then the
Yep.
communication between the doctors. So, hey, you have an appointment at XYZ versus the emails that you get from you have an appointment here where it can be hacked much easier. It's an email
Correct.
sent. Hey, you have I've seen this where I've had surgery where, hey, you're scheduled for surgery this date, and it was through email. That's not really HIPAA compliant, is it?
Yeah. Neil, and my other question would be yes, it isn't. It's not. I don't think it's effective. The other question is for surgery. When you get the instructions on the preparing for surgery, how do you get them? You get them as a piece of paper, right? They give you a pack of papers with highlighted lines
Thanks for
saying
before you
what.
leave. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now it's crazy to me because the preparation for surgery is critical. It's critical for the surgery to happen, because if the patient needs to fast and they didn't fast, then they're not going to have surgery. If they need to take medication prior to surgery and they didn't take it, surgery cannot happen. Post-op care might not happen. And the idea that here, I gave you a pack of papers, therefore this complex set of instructions is ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
it's never the analogy I give is you come into my garage with your car. I check the car and I tell you, listen, the two front brakes are done. We need to change the brakes. Okay. Here's a pack of papers. Here you're gonna stop by the part store, pick the prescription of two front brakes, and here's the instructions on how to do this at home.
Yeah. It
That's
doesn't work.
that's
No, and it makes so much sense when you look at Pronex versus other things you integrate. What makes it a game changer in your opinion, and why you like partnering with them and having your integration of your software with theirs?
the first thing that comes to mind is that it is clinician designed. ProNex has done an unbelievable job at developing directly to the need of the client, which is the healthcare provider. I have been involved with their team for so long, and the whole process of getting the product built was around interviewing the clinicians and having the thought leaders in the field that they're working in give the needs. Because again, as a clinician, I've experienced many products that were developed in a lab based on this is what the clinician should have, but obviously there was no discussion with the clinician based on my experience with the technology. So I think that's the first thing. Second, their unwavering insistence on solving the problems that come along the way for the clinicians and the patients is also something that I haven't seen in other partners.
No.
So many times I'll hear Fred says to the clients, when you say jump, I'm just going to ask how high.
Yeah.
And that's really how it is. The client will sit with the client. The client says, I need this, and the client will get that what they ask for, and it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give you because this is a ProNex podcast, information
Sure.
on you if you had questions, and then also how can people engage with ProNex? Two things.
Okay. So how to get in touch with me? LinkedIn. If you look for my name, I'm sure it's going to be on the screen here. So Eran Kabakov. Search me on LinkedIn. You can feel free to email me at Eran, ERAN, at doco.la. So that's my email. Feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to discuss any of the topics we discussed today further. And I'm sorry, what was the
The
question about?
website would be pronexinc.com right now.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it, Eran. It was fun.
Thank you so much for
All
having
right.
me. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're listening and watching the Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.